My name is Chinny Ogunro, and I will be your host for this particular interview. I am a healthcare professional, very passionate about healthcare in low and middle income countries. Specifically in sub-Saharan Africa, I've committed myself to improving, to delivering high quality, low cost healthcare across emerging markets.
I'm glad to be interviewed by someone that's also quite esteemed, because I'm actually quite passionate about healthcare in Africa as well. In fact, I started developing a paper on public-private partnership in providing universal healthcare for Africa, but we can discuss about that later on. I think just briefly, I'd like to give the story. So when I applied to the IAEA, they always ask you the question, why did you apply to the IAEA? I applied there twice. And I always give the story of when I was in final year at university. I was in economics, and my seminar teacher said to me, what would you like to do for your career? And I said, I'd like to work with the World Bank and help developing countries. And he kind of laughed at me and said, that's really difficult. You have to be very intelligent to do something like that. And I said, okay, there's no harm in trying. I mean, and of course, you fast forward to 2005, and I worked for an organization that we were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. I think one of the lessons I drew from that is that no matter what anyone else says to you, if you have some kind of vision about what you really want to do, just start the process, just start the race. You can't win the race unless you start the race. So just get onto the track and just start. And you never know where that road might take you to. And of course, when I started working on the IAEA, my first big projects was actually helping Zambia set up their first radiotherapy hospital. So not many people know this, but cancer is actually the biggest killer disease in the world. And in Africa, it's already half and half. It already kills more than HIV, malaria, TB, but everybody thinks, malaria, TB. But because it's a non-communicable disease, it's basically like a lifestyle disease. So when I started working on that project, I learned a lot beyond the project, because I worked with professional doctors who are oncologists and medical physicists. And I used to ask them lots of questions about what cancer is. And from a personal perspective, my father, my grandfather, my brother-in-law also passed away from cancer. So things like cancer and radiotherapy are actually quite personal to me. So I always try and put an extra effort in that area. So I'm happy to be associated with Zambia's first cancer hospital, which was actually opened by the now deceased president in 2007. And at the moment, they treat about, I think, 1,500 patients a year. So I would probably rank that as probably one of my big achievements, because I work with a big team, and it's not just about me, it's about the impact treating someone with cancer can have on their lives, especially women. In Africa, cancer affects mostly women, sadly. And we know in a lot of African countries, it's the women that actually take care of the family and take care of the children. So when a woman goes, it's actually quite a huge blow to the society. So if you think about, if you save a woman, it's like there's that concept. If you want to educate a man, if you want to educate an individual, teach a man. If you want to educate a generation, teach a woman, basically educate her, because she's going to educate all her children. So I think having that impact on the community was really big. In terms of the worst parts of my career, I always like to think of everything as being something you learn from. I did a couple of maybe weird jobs when I was like at university. One of them was washing cars by hand. And I have to confess, after about 4 or 5 days, I was like, I can't do this. It's really tough. It was just like, people with posh cars would drive it. I was in London back then. I was at university in England, and my cousin was like, oh yeah, let's do this. It makes really good money. And about 3 years, I was like, you can continue, but I can't do this. 8 hours washing cars by hand. I was like, can't I go to a car wash to do this? Why are they coming here? They're like, they want their cars washed by hand. So maybe that's probably one of my experiences that I probably think that comes to mind at the moment. Yeah.
I know about doing, let's say, menial work or work with your hands. One of my first jobs was making bagels. I would begin at a bagel shop early in the morning, and to this day, I can make the best bagel you will ever taste. The best bagel.
Oh, wow.
But it teaches you some things, but you also realize I don't want to do this for my whole life. And I think that's another thing that I'd like to get across, particularly to young people. From your perspective, what are those maybe either jobs or people or even just experiences that you have had that you think shaped the person you are. Yes, the professional person, but even your character. Who are those people, or what are those experiences that have really, sometimes people have they're very passionate about something because based on a particular memorable experience that they've had. If there's anything of that nature that you have had, I would certainly love to hear about it, and more importantly, how it impacted your character and your long-term person.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I mean, like, the first time I actually made a bit of money was when I actually lived in Nigeria, and they were actually doing some like refurbishment in our house in Lagos, and my brother and sister and I decided to like I don't know if it was safe back then, I don't know if it affected, but there was like asbestos roofing left, and we kind of built like a bit of a hut. And then we used to back then things were much cheaper, so we'd go around the corner on the street and buy like rice and meat for like, back then it was like 10 kobo. And then we would bring it into our rack, and there was some of our relatives staying in the same compound. And we just basically started selling to them. And then my dad bought lots of coke back then, and we just basically took it from his garage and started selling it to our uncles and our friends. But what I learned from that, I've always been passionate about food. In fact, that's what I also want to do in the future, was that if you're just passionate about anything, just start. And one of the questions people say, oh, how do I know what my purpose is? And I always say to them, what did you love when you were a child, like under 10 years old? And like, oh, I like this. I say, well, I think when you're a child, there's a bit of purity that's in you. So you probably need to go back to kind of discover a little bit of that purity. I mean, I remember I loved drawing planes. I actually started selling comics to my classmates. I used to go to Corona School, Victoria Island. And in fact, I'm more even embarrassed to share this. I actually failed class 1 because I just spent class 1 just drawing the whole of the year. So, in Nigeria, they really stress for education. So I didn't pass class 1. And even though I think, why are they testing us, examining us at class 1? But anyway, another conversation. So I actually failed class 1. And then, so I did class 1 twice. But I was already selling comics to my classmates. But if you fast forward, when I actually had a good education in Nigeria, when I came to England, I actually got promoted. So I actually was supposed to be in Form 2. So I actually skipped Form 2 because when I came to England, back then the education in Nigeria was fantastic. So I actually skipped a class. I actually caught up with my classmates. So my advice is always that whatever you're passionate about, just try and think about, oh, what did I really love? Even if it was like drawing or doing treasure hunting. It doesn't have to be exactly treasure hunting, but that means you were inquisitive, and think about how you can actually relate that to something that you would love to do. I said earlier on today, someone asked me a question like this concept of asking your kids, what would you like to be? Rather ask them, what would you like to change in the future? What is it that you don't like about the life or the society? And then just start working on it. Even if you spend 1 or 2 hours on a weekend, just getting in contact with that part of you. And I think hopefully in the future, there will come a time, if you're really serious, that opportunity will actually manifest itself.
I find it interesting that you actually speak impact and passion in such a concrete manner, because you don't really find many people on the continent, or many leaders on the continent, who do that. Maybe in part because we are in a resource constrained environment, resources are scarce, and people tend to focus on, I would say, only the financial aspect of things. So is there, how do I put this? Let me back up just for a second. Passions may change over time. And I tell people this: what you're passionate about when you're 10 years old may differ from what you're passionate about when you're 20, when you're 30, when you're 40. How have you been able to maybe navigate the different pathways of a career? I recently started telling people that you don't have to commit to just one thing. Of course, in Nigeria, the way Nigeria people are, we hustle, you do this, you have your side hustle, you do that. But more broadly, with the rise of the gig economy, people are embracing the idea of portfolio careers. You may have your 9 to 5 that's very corporate. You may have your online drop shipping business. You may have this other thing that's just a hobby. How do you yourself manage your own varied interests and maybe the activities you choose to pursue for financial reasons and activities you choose to pursue for either impact or passion reasons.
Okay. So, I mean, once I was asked to give a talk to a school when I lived in South Africa, and I said, if I say some of the things, your parents might actually not like me. But so
Thank you.
I think, I don't know whether it's the way that I was raised in terms of like always going for what you really believe in. So if I give you a snapshot, so even before I left Nigeria, before I was 10, my mom used to always like bake cakes. And I was just fascinated by food and taste. And then when we left Nigeria, obviously went to school, started a career, did economics, worked for the British government. And then it's only when I started working at the IA in about 2002, and it was a little bit stressful. And what I did was like, oh, what can I do to distress? So actually, I just used to spend the weekends in the kitchen, like cooking or baking, and just challenging myself. So I was like, okay, I used to really love baking. I thought, okay, when I go out, I don't really like the way the cakes taste. I want the cakes to taste the way that I like it. So for that to happen, I've got to bake it. I've got to cook it myself. So I just started doing that. And then before you knew it, I just started saying, oh, let me just write about what I'm doing, my experience. So I actually had a baking blog for about 6 years. And then this year I thought about an idea of actually having it, just turn that into an ebook, because the material is there. So I might as well just use it rather than just, leaving it in dust. So that's why I always advocate for whatever you're passionate about. And then this week I heard something from Jay Shetty. He's a very passionate, purpose-driven expert. And someone asked him a question about passion. And he said that passion actually usually comes from your youth, because you're quite fresh, and then you just do everything a lot with your heart. And then obviously things carry on in your life, but it's experience. You can think of different ways of how to like basically skin the cat in a way. So you can think, okay, if I'm passionate about food, do I have to have a restaurant? No, not particularly. You don't have to have a restaurant, but there are other things you can do with it. And for example, I was writing about it because I had spare time, so I'm already cooking. So it's like just saying, okay, I'm cooking, let me just do something about it. Like Jamie Oliver, the famous British cook, he's got about, I think, 20 cookbooks, but he never sits down to write any cookbook whatsoever. Whenever he's talking about it, he's got someone that's just writing about it. And now you can have your phone, you can just record it, you can turn that into it can turn into text, for example. So you can just say, okay, I'm doing this. Can I document this now? As you rightly said about the gig economy, you can just get material out there. You never know how that will resonate and how someone can actually relate to that and actually get motivated about what you're talking about. Because we're all kind of one. So you're definitely going to relate to someone in the world, not just one person. You're going to relate to a lot of people. So that's why I always advocate for just doing something. And for me, passion relates to the heart. So it's like I see it as a concept of just keeping your heart a bit alive, like just not just looking forward to retirement and thinking of retirement. It's like in between, there's other things that you can do in your life. So maybe that's what I would say for it for now. I can go on a lot more about this, but maybe
no, I'll save that for later and move on to my next question, which is really about the impact of different aspects of what people believe might help their career. So I recently spoke about or posted about having a relatively diverse network, having knowing different sorts of people from different backgrounds across different industries, across different age groups even, in order to be able to access different sorts of opportunities or jobs or expert knowledge. And I wanted to ask you, because I hear this all the time, people say your net worth is your network, but your network is your net worth, yes. But at the same time, I'm quite a technocrat. I'm quite particular about if people need to know their stuff. If you don't know your stuff, the network that you have, it will not mean much because those people will just know you for putting out rubbish. But sometimes, on the African continent or in our sorts of environments, it's a bit of an unfortunate balance when you see somebody who may not have the substance rising to whatever glory we may deem them to have. What is your take? Should people focus on being book smart, knowing their stuff, knowing how to execute? Or is it kind of like the social hustle and getting the right connections? If everybody knows Otedola and Dangote, maybe everybody will be successful.
Yeah, I think maybe just in that last point. So even people like that, if you read their stories, they didn't just hustle the whole time. They started from something. Some of them from very humble beginnings. If you read Dangote's story, for example. I think the concept of networking, the idea is really, I think you should get a balance. You should know your stuff, and you need to network, because we don't live in a bubble in the world. So I heard something today about people, there's this concept of whether it's imposter syndrome or fake it till you make it kind of thing. But I think I think the concept of integrity is very, very important. So you have to know something, and you learn by experience. So there's no way, even if whoever is the best physician in the world, the best surgeon in the world, they're constantly learning. It's not like, oh, whatever, I can just operate on whatever I want. You're constantly learning, but the most important thing is really you just have to start. And I believe that if you really fake it, you're going to get exposed sooner or later, and all you have is your reputation. So I think you should focus on what you really you need to know, what you're interested in, and then network. And people respect you in a network as well. This concept about network being one-way traffic, actually, I think is two-way traffic. Because someone said networking is about what you're going to give that person. Look at it that way, not about what you can get from that person. What can I give this person that they'll remember me? Oh, you speak to someone, say, oh, that's a really interesting idea. Or even don't feel embarrassed to disagree with them. If someone says something, say, well, actually, I don't agree with that. And they will actually remember you and actually respect you for it. I used to have a former boss that I used to work with, and everybody couldn't stand the guy. But one thing you couldn't take away from him was that he was very thorough, and he would expose you, because he was a bit of a micromanager, but a really serious micromanager. So basically, he would know your work better than you. And he would ask you questions, not because he wanted to know, because he wanted to test if you actually really knew your work. But what I found out with this guy was that if you disagree with him, he actually respected you more. Because you weren't saying, oh, yes, sir, yes, sir. He was like, oh, okay, this person disagreed with me. Okay, explain why you disagree with me. And then he gave you more respect. And if in fact it made your job easier, because he respected you more, then you see he actually helped you with different things in your own career. So I think the idea is really to get a balance. Know a little bit about what you need to do. Like, for example, I can call myself, someone asked me earlier on this week, are you a coffee expert? I say, yeah, I can have a conversation with anybody in the world about coffee. But it's taking me 13, 14 years, and even last week, I'm still learning something new. I can still have a conversation. And someone said earlier on this week, I think of today, active listening means asking questions, being curious, for example. And most people default to talking about themselves. So if you ask questions, they're more than happy to share, and they'll remember you and they'll respect you. So I think get a balance. I don't believe in faking and hustling all the time. Know a little about what you really want, and you get more respect that way.
Very, very, very true. I have to I've never had a single cup of coffee in my entire life. I can't, the smell of coffee, it gives me a headache. I feel nauseated, not even coffee ice cream. So to hear that you're a coffee expert, I'm very happy for you, because I have friends who they literally take coffee like to their vein. They hook them up to a coffee IV, and they'll be the happiest people in the world. But I myself, I'm not even a coffee novice. It's as though the stuff doesn't exist to me. So if you ever wanted to have a conversation about coffee, I'll just say I default to your opinion. You're the expert.
Well, when I had my cafe, I actually converted tea drinkers to coffee. I actually challenged. So my customers say, oh, I can't stand coffee. I said, okay, let me make you a cup of coffee and just taste it. There are different ways of making coffee. And whenever coffee is made, I don't think coffee should be bitter. So I think if coffee tastes bitter, that means there's been a problem with the process of making coffee. So there's so many factors in making a good cup of coffee. Plus, it's also very, very healthy for you. It's got a lot of antioxidants in it. So in terms
I can tell you're passionate about your coffee antioxidants. I'm like,
I challenged the doctor once. He came to my cafe and he said to me, "Oh, coffee is really bad for me." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Yeah, it helps with this." And I said, "Well," I said according to him, lots of studies. I said, "Well, this study confirmed that this and this study," and he was in fact, he was so embarrassed. Rather than admit that I was right, he just walked out of my cafe. I was like, okay, fine. But
it shows your expertise, and that's fantastic. So we only have a few minutes left, but I'm going to have to ask you this question, because if you were a woman, it would definitely come up, and that is, the work-life balance. How do you balance being a professional man as well as a husband? I asked this because I accidentally called your wife the last time we tried to have this. So I was a family aspect. I'm a big believer in for people who do want to get married or have families in prioritizing your relationships, the happiness and strength of your family. But sometimes it's difficult. So how did you navigate those waters? How have you been navigating those waters?
Yeah, so my dad, he's passed away now. So when my mom married him, he was like a typical Nigerian man. When he was growing up, never allowed into the kitchen. So my mom said, when I have kids, she said to my dad, if we have sons, can I at least teach them basics? He was like, I don't care, you can teach them whatever you want. So that's how it started. So I always love food. I always tell the story, like when I was growing up in school, everybody they'll have this thing, they have this Niger all the time. Ask everybody, oh, what's your hobby? I'd be like, oh, football, this. And they'll come to me, I'd be like, eating. They were like, what? Eating? It's like, so I always like that concept of food. So in terms of my family, my wife doesn't really like cooking, even though she is a good cook. So in terms of that balance, like whether it's coming home, and then we're both home at the same time. For me, cooking is like a stress reliever. So I like cooking. It's not, and it's actually as a way of, because I loved art as a child. So it's like a bit of creating something, getting ingredients together and just preparing something. And of course, seeing people that you love, whether it's your family or your friends, actually enjoying what you've made. So that part of it was taken care of. And then my wife is very much, she does a lot of stuff that the men should do. So in terms of fixing light bulbs and, all the things like that, I don't really like stuff like that. So she's like, oh, I need to fix the light bulb, I need to fix this. I'm like, yeah, you go ahead. I will sort out dinner. You can fix the light bulb and fix the pipes and stuff like that. So I think we had a little bit of balance, luckily, from that perspective. And I always like, the way that my family were very family orientated. Every time we have dinner at the table, so we always promoted that. And it was really nice when my daughter, she's now 20, and she wrote us a note the other day just saying that she always felt that in terms of the way that she was brought up, very family orientated and always trying to make sure that we all do things together and then you keep each other together. I think that's how I try to approach, because I always liked spending time with my family, like, going on holiday and cooking for them and doing other things. And my wife does other bits and pieces as well. So we try and get that kind of balance together. I think it's not easy, don't get me wrong, especially if you're in Europe where we were. So, like in Nigeria, a lot of people have like extended family and you have people that can help you, whether it's house boy, house girl. Whereas in Europe, it's actually quite tough. It's just you, your wife, and that's it. So you have to really get a real balance and just a real understanding. Say, this is our roles. We've been blessed with kids. So you need to just basically step up, and the kids will actually remember it, because the most important thing you have to have an impression on children. It's not when they're 15 or 16; it's too late. It's the first 5 years. And there's lots of studies on that, and I read a lot of psychology books on that. The first 5 years is the most important. So you've got to make sure you invest at the first 5 years. Just be there for them, play with them, and that's what they're going to grow up with. So I hope I answered your question.
No, very, very much so. It's rather insightful. I'm a stickler for time, so I have 3 questions left, but I only have time for one.
Okay.
I just want you to, if there are any lasting words or any, let's say, words of wisdom that you would like to impart to everybody in our audience. Maybe nothing talking about your favorite type of Ethiopian coffee, but professional words of wisdom on career advice or motivation. What would those words be?
I think the most important thing is that really to know about yourself, because you can never have an impact on anybody if you don't know yourself. You can't lead if you don't know yourself. And that's why when I use the terminology leadership coaching, I actually mean leadership for yourself, not coaching leaders. If you can't lead yourself, you don't know yourself, I think it's going to be difficult for you to be the best person that you can be, and also the best person you can be for others who are around you. So that's what I would really like to share with people. Just take some time, whether it's 5-10 minutes a day, on the weekend, know about what really motivates you, what your values are, rooted in your virtues of courage, wisdom, chastity, honesty, for example. And you really need to know yourself, because then you're really going to live a more fulfilling life. I really believe that. And also you'd be a gem to all those who are around you. So just start with yourself first and foremost. And I think that starts with you. It starts with you. And then careers and stuff like that careers come and go, especially in this economy. You know, it's not like our parents who, when they grew up, they were in a job for like 40 years till they retired. But now that's very rare. So that's probably the first thing I'll probably advise.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. If we had much longer time, or if people in this day and age were willing to sit for longer, I have a whole list of follow-up questions I'd have loved to hear from you, but perhaps we'll do a part two. I don't know, it depends on your availability, but I wanted to really thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you to everybody who is watching. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. Thanks a lot, Chinny. All the best.
Okay.
Okay.